This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Karen Light. You're a multi-passionate creative. How you doing tonight?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great. Great to talk to new people all the time.
Yeah.
And people know they can check us out on Newsly. You can see that little icon up there. We got a little coupon code Ghost. You can check that out for free if you use the Ghost. That's another platform that we're on. It's audio only. But check that out. We'll be on there later tonight on Newsly. And then also, one of the things we always ask every guest before we get into your story is a couple of questions: is what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Oh, what motivates me? Um, I always tell people my favorite things to do are make things and help other people make things. And I just, every time I'm in a creative process or I'm in the creative process with someone else, it's like a whole exploratory thing. The whole person goes on a journey. And I love the discoveries that are there for myself and with other people. And I truly believe that, you know, it's a big part of making this world a better place is creatives stepping into their power and being able to feel like they can imagine something different and use that creativity to make it a reality and then inspire other people to do that. And I just think that has positive ripples. And those are the kind of ripples that I want to see and be a part of in the world. So it's a big motivator.
Yeah, I think that the whole creative process, being inspired yourself as a person, and then also the collaborative effort, as a musician, we can. I tend to write a lot of stuff for myself, but I love working with other musicians, and I love
Mm-hmm.
working with like artists to do a cover,
Yeah.
or film director to do a video. And so it's
Yeah.
just when you do different forms, or an actor to, plays a character in the video. So like when you run into creatives, you just get, wow, this is so cool. The way people see things, like the lens that
Yeah.
people see things, like a film director versus a photographer versus an actor versus a painter versus, like, everybody's got a different way of seeing things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's cool to hear what people have to say. Right.
I agree. Yeah, I do a lot of children's book illustrations for self-publishing authors. So that's one of the reasons that I like working with self-publishing authors because we're in the co-creative process together. I'm not working through an agency who's working through a publishing company. I'm like in it with them. And
Yeah.
so, how are you seeing this character? How am I seeing this character? And then it, all combines into something maybe neither one of us quite thought of, but it's awesome when it comes
It's like,
together.
yeah, it's that flow state. Like
Hmm.
you can, like, if you get, sometimes you get somebody's like top down. I'm writing everything. You just play what I gave you. Versus
Hmm.
if somebody says, "What do you think goes with that?"
Yeah.
And then you're like, "Oh, like, yeah, let me hear what you have to say." So, let a drummer come up with the drum beat and say, "Let my drum machine tell him what to do." Like
Hmm.
he's a drummer. There's a reason why he's a drummer.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, if you have, 'cause people have all these AI tools today. My daughter's a graphic artist, and she's always like pulling her hair. It's like people thinking like, "Oh, that I don't need to deal with a graphic artist anymore." I'm like, maybe you still want to talk to him.
Maybe you still might want to. Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot that we still have to offer, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, because it's like that.
Uh-huh.
It's like it's like when you're in a band. It's like that thing when you're together in the studio. Like you're saying, somebody, like an artist, sees you, see the character, like the way
Hmm.
you see it, and then the author sees it their way they see it, and then when you come together, you have the different shades and colors. It's like, oh, you bring something to the table, and you're like, wow, that
Yeah.
that creation moment. Like,
Yeah. And I think really just the practice of being open to other people changing your ideas. Like, it's a more divergent process. And we're like getting bigger, we're getting wider, we're doing more, we're thinking other ideas instead of just like getting it done, and to be
yeah,
open to that process, that's when a lot of magic happens. That's when a lot of like, oh, I couldn't imagine that on my own.
or the lane
Um,
shifting, or the lane combining is what
yeah.
I love. Is like, I love having somebody, like, imagine something in a different way,
Hmm.
not being totally, just totally, like, just tied to my original idea.
Yeah, I play this game with people a lot because I do a lot of coaching and I use doodles in my coaching. I
Mhm.
love the visual form for a lot of reasons, and if we're in a group situation, I play the if this were my doodle game, And so other people, before they even say anything about what they doodled, the other people say, oh, this is where my doodle, it makes me think of this, or it makes me feel this. And it's a practice for the person who drew it to let go of what they think they doodled or what they think it's about, and just be open to receiving these ideas. And just seeing how that can even enrich your own work. Like, I love it when I make a painting and somebody comes over and they're like, oh, this reminds me of this. Is this what you did? And I'm like, no, but that's great. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
kinda,
totally down with that. Yeah.
I like the happy accident of it. Like, I always talk
Mhm.
about the idea of a happy accident or the flow state.
Yes.
Like, you can have this idea, but you don't have to be totally, you can be divorce yourself from that idea,
Yes.
and you can kinda just flow state it. You might have a framework, but suddenly, like, the idea of the muse, like the Victorians
Hmm.
had this idea that if you're a poet, that you kinda channel the muse, and you do. Either you channel that muse when you're any kind of artist,
Hmm.
and it's kinda like when you trust yourself and you don't get obsessed with perfection, that
Yes.
you can allow kind of that doodle moment, kind of a
Hmm.
scratch, and we call them like scratch takes. You just
Hmm.
put something down, and you might not think it's gonna be, a lot of times that thing you just put down, you didn't really plan it, is
Yeah.
what you use.
Yeah.
It ends up being better than the stuff you plan.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you really touched on something there, which is like really trusting a process, trusting yourself in the process, trusting the process, and like being willing to do the dance, not having to direct everything. We're kind of used to, and I think in our society really values a lot of like knowing where you're going, knowing what you're
Yeah.
doing, having the plan. And the creative process sort of, spins that around a bit. And it is like, well, do you want to go for a ride? Because if you want to go for a ride, this could be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
But
so it's kinda like
yeah.
Jack Kerouac on the road versus a planned vacation. They're
Hmm.
like, "I'm going here because I'm gonna love it,"
Yes.
versus kinda going on a road trip and not knowing where you're going, right?
Hmm.
And it's like jazz, it's like, versus a classical piece. Like
Yeah.
Chopin or Bach is like, it's very structured, you know what you're gonna do. If
Hmm.
you go and do a jazz fusion, you might have a structure, but it can go out there and then come back. You can
Hmm.
kinda go into discordance and noise and, things that are like, just not planned, but
Hmm.
then come back to a structure and then go back out and come back in. And that in itself is so freeing
Yeah.
of your the idea that like you have to know every note. That like why not have like it's an opportunity. Like
Hmm.
a missed note is not a bad thing. It could be like that's actually not a
The
missed
best
note.
thing you did. Yeah.
It actually evolves the song and you take it somewhere that you
Hmm.
didn't plan on. And then they're like, oh, then that becomes the next thing you work on because it's like
Yeah.
it's just unexpected. And I think that kind of doodling or freeing yourself to just have improvisational, comedy, like a, comedian might have a set sketch,
Hmm.
but then they read the room and
Yeah.
they read the feel, and then something
Yeah.
comes out. It's like, hey, that evolves into, and the bit evolves over time. You
Hmm.
know, there was a lot of bits,
Yeah.
your prior bits I was listening to over time, and it's like they evolved. You could actually listen that he adjusted them, and then it
I
would
love
over
that.
time, and it just got like wow, like that's kind of the genius of it.
Yeah, it's like bouncing off of whatever is happening, like trusting that that's a part of it and that can enrich your experience. Earlier this year, I was going to do a painting and I took the packaging off the canvas and there was this big rip in the middle of the canvas.
Oh
And
wow,
my first thought was like, "Pfft,
throw it
well,
up.
guess I'll take this back and, get another one." And then I was like, wait a second, hold up. And it turned into a great piece that I worked inspired by the rip.
Oh
So
wow, you used
yeah, I worked behind it. I worked in front of it and like it became a bit three-dimensional, which I really enjoy doing anyway. So, and it just wouldn't have happened had the rip not happened. It's like how we decide to look at those things that we think are
yeah,
mistakes. And if we're willing to play with them, it can be pretty amazing.
yeah. Because traditional methods sometimes don't apply. Because people say like sometimes pieces of art, you kind of like people want to know your process and try to dissect your process. Each
Mhm.
piece kind of has its own way of being or coming into being. And
Yeah.
so how I create one piece isn't always the roadmap. And people always want to have this tried and true like algorithm. They want to know this is the secret thing. This is what I can do all the time. I'm always going to get this.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it gets boring.
It is
Because,
boring. Yeah. If I'm not stuck and like completely frustrated at some point in the creation process, I'm just it's almost like I'm just regurgitating something I've already done
yeah, phone
instead
it
of
in.
like, yeah, discovering something new there, having a new aha moment, letting it take me somewhere. And yeah, letting that happen it's a risk, I think that's why they say creativity takes courage, because it's a risk. Sometimes you get to a point and you're like, I'm kind of attached to how well this is going. And then I just got this idea and I could ruin it all,
Yeah,
and do you do it or not?
yeah, it's kind of
I tend
volatile.
to do it.
Yeah, it's a volatile thing, where I feel it's very cathartic. I do art because not because I'm gonna make X or it's gonna have this impact. I actually work through a lot of things in my life to, deal with, challenges, feelings, emotions. And I found that the art allows me to kind of process it. So I
Hmm.
don't kind of just hold on to it. And then
Yeah.
once I move on to the next thing. And that's why, you go to therapists and they're like, yeah, you should use art therapy. And whether or not you know how to knit or paint or do photography or doodle, whatever, the different therapists will come up with like, we should get you to do something.
Hmm.
Take your
Yeah.
mind off of your like loop because you're in this loop. You got to get out of the loop.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I use it so much in coaching, is because you get in these thought loops. They're just the words that we say to ourselves all day long. We're always narrating. And then you draw a picture and you suddenly can shift. You can kind of get below the words a little bit and see something else if you know how to look at it, right? If you're
Mhm.
open to interpretation. I always tell people, I'm like, just assume it has great meaning for you. We'll just do an experiment. You don't have to believe me yet, but just experiment with me. Assume it does. And then there's always something rich there, even if it looks like the craziest little abstract piece. You're like, no, it actually captured something for you. um and yeah, helps people the process itself is also soothing, soothes our nervous systems,
Yeah.
releases, and like the good feeling hormones, and reduces cortisol, and like does all this lovely stuff for us, um so that we can listen to our higher level thinking, right? And the lower level fear stuff isn't taking over as much when we're in those states. So it's got
Yeah.
a lot of benefits.
For the need for safety, because a lot of times people,
Mhm.
you try to get them to, maybe you can get them to do a diary and maybe you can get them to do other things. But this idea of like of doodling, I really like it because a lot of times people don't have it like a permission structure. And it's like you get into art therapy and say, well, I can't paint. I
Mhm.
can't draw. I can't do
Right.
photography. So they're already putting up the wall saying they can't do it. But if you're doodling, everybody can doodle, right?
Everybody can
Everybody,
doodle.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's kind of like an entrance level. Like you give a permission structure, it's kind of wide open. Like how could you say you can't doodle, right?
Mhm.
So then at least you can start getting what's inside and get it on the page.
Yeah. Get
And
it out of your head.
that's the whole thing is like trying to get what's in and get it out.
Yeah.
And that's what artists we like. We kind of that's our we are able to take that vulnerability and then push it out in the world and be able to like deal with the impact of the feedback. And maybe sometimes
Yeah.
we don't do with it that great, but it's like the idea is like we can actually get to the step where we put it out, where other
Yes.
people kind of keep it in.
Yeah, and I tell people often, I'm like, art's like a tool to reclaim for every human. Like it's um people walk around like singing their favorite tune, all the time. They like, bebop around their house, do stuff. But like suddenly when it comes to drawing, it's like, oh, I can't do that. And I'm like, doodling doesn't care about I have this whole thing called the spirit of a doodle I love to share with people. And like, it doesn't care about outcomes. It's all about process. It's all about just seeing what happens. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to have any skill. It's just another tool that's available to you. And it's a visual one, just like any other tool you could
Well,
put in your
visual is so
toolbox.
important. Like a
Hmm.
lot of times, even in, why we in software design we use the whiteboard, like everything. detectives on TV use the whiteboard, but
Yes.
like the whiteboard allows us to take big ideas and then kind
Mm-hmm.
of flow chart them out. And we
Mm-hmm.
do little diagrams like this is going into this and this is coming out of that. This
Mm-hmm.
is like and this is where all these things are going, and we can kind of see the big picture. So we know our inputs and all our outputs, know what our rules are, know what our goals are. But you can take those things and not get so crazy. We get really detailed,
Yeah.
but you can kind of high level pitch, just do it at the 50,000 foot level, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you can start to dive as you
Mm-hmm.
get more comfortable, like understanding, like what did you put down,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
then try to interpret, like, well, what did I,
Can
what was I trying to say?
Can I share a simple tool that helps people a lot? Those moments where you are like, it's overwhelming for one reason. You're feeling a little chaotic. We're coming up on the holidays. There's a great reason to feel a little chaotic sometimes, right?
Mm,
Things are overwhelming. The to-do list is long, and people feel like they say that phrase a lot. It's just spiraling out of control. And so when people say that to me, I was like, well, let's spiral it back in. And it's just a simple thing. I have people close their eyes, take a nice deep breath. And then when they open their breath, I just have them take one marker, pen, whatever, and in the middle of their paper, draw the slowest spiral they've ever drawn while
mm,
breathing, keeping the breath, but just keeping it nice and tight, just spiraling around really slowly. And once I could see they've kind of settled into that, I say, okay, just like follow your marker now. Like just follow it. Go wherever it wants to go. And before you know it, they're just sort of weaving around the paper, and then like we could just do that for a minute. How do you feel? Oh, I feel much more relaxed. Okay, you just spiraled back in. We're always spiraling out of control. Like
yeah,
this is a simple thing to come back to ourselves, and then if there is a challenge that they brought up, I'm like, let's look at your spiral for some clues right now. And then see if there's something in there. What does it remind you of? What are you thinking about when you look at it? How does it make you feel? And it like creates this whole conversation, we could take it. I could do more prompts depending on what's coming up, but that's just spiral back into yourself is a simple little visual doodle that
that's
everybody can do.
that like you have come up with all kinds of cool like insights from being an artist. You figured out like how can I get somebody to kind of you know like a
Yeah.
breathing exercise, like like meditation, like you get somebody that's got too much noise,
Yes.
too many things going on. They got getting pinged all the time on their phone. So we always tell people like turn off the phone, turn off the watch, turn off the video, turn off the TV, and
Mhm.
just kind of before you even try to do any art, just kind of clear your head.
Yeah. Come back. Yeah.
And
Just like
then like
regather.
yeah, and then see what comes out after that, right?
Mhm.
Then
Yep.
then you start to pull from the subconscious, you're pulling from like what's going on with the muse going on. So you're everything you do as an artist is coming from all the inputs and outputs and what's inside.
Mhm. And if
And
you
then
just give yourself a second, your brain loves to put together things in new ways. It like has it all in there, but you
yeah.
just have to like give it a second. And I think a lot of these tools came to me because I taught for decades in
Mhm.
crazy busy, junior high, high school, elementary school. I did all the grades, but all these crazy classrooms, and kids are coming in high energy. And of course it's art. So everybody's like, we can do whatever we want now.
And now they're just like playing
And I
around.
had to like learn how to bring a room full of like children to a more focused
Get
place.
more focused place, yeah.
Yeah, but they get there too. They get there too. It's really amazing what can happen. And I'm like, well, this we could do this for ourselves. It doesn't have to be in a classroom. You can do this. Everybody can do this. And those kids don't all come in. I mean, I think every kid's an artist, but most kids, don't say I'm an artist. But
Yeah, yeah, most of them
they
play some
still
I
picked
can't
up the
draw.
pen. They couldn't
Yeah, they
wait
can
to
do it.
do it. Like, yeah. Yeah. So, and that lives in all of us. That lives in all of us.
It's like when you're brought into band class and they're telling you gotta learn some instrument, and there's some kids that are like not really into instruments, right?
Mhm.
And so you're trying to get them to like get the basics, but there's some level of basic that you can try to get them into it, and some people are like, but you find good music teachers find a way to get everybody to get involved.
Mhm.
I mean, like the best teachers I ever had, they got kids who would have never picked up the recorder and got
Mhm.
them to do it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, and got them to do it without getting mad about it. Actually got them to do it, and they actually like, wow, I actually did something. Right, it made them
Mhm.
feel good about it. It's just really a teaching style. Like if you
Yeah.
get the teacher that makes you want to come to class.
It's an art too, right?
Yeah,
Like it
yeah,
really is. I love to teach, and it's the same process. Like I'm going to come with a lot of thoughts and ideas and skills and tools, and then I'm going to see who's in front of me and where they're at, and then I have to dance with those people or that person or whoever
yeah.
I'm with. They have to be a part of this. I can't again get too controlly or it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You have to create the container.
So how is it when you like to work with creators, right?
Hmm.
And so if you're working with other creators that already kind of have a process,
Uh,
are they do you run into any issues where people are more, maybe resistant to your process because they have their own process, or you deal with people who are more open to actually hear you out?
Yeah, well, I work with creatives in a few different ways. One is, like I mentioned, through book illustration. And that process, I think it's how you approach it. Like I really tell people from the get go, we are co creating this thing. I want to hear all your ideas. I want you to be open. So, really setting the stage helps. Like, we're
Hmm.
going to be in storyboard sessions together. We're going to get it all out. And I want to hear, even when I shoot you a sketch, it's like a conversation. You tell me things back and I shoot it back out. We're going to have a conversation on this whole thing. And I think people really like that overall. There's very few instances where I've just been like, oh, this isn't fun. Like, usually we're having a good time. So I'm glad about that. There are situations, and there's been a few where it's like, for whatever reason, our creative ideas are not clicking together.
Not clicking.
Yeah. And I have processes for figuring that out early on with the character sketch process so that we don't get too far and then have to like be like, so it's helpful to have those things in place so you can it's like any other relationship. Sometimes
Yeah.
they're just not going to work out, but most of the time they do. And then I also work a lot with creatives. I love to coach creative people, specifically a lot of folks who are struggling with like ADHD or other executive function
Mhm.
challenges. And um, I think what's really interesting about that is let's say they're musicians, right? They're so lit up by their music. They're so creative. They're doing this thing. But then when it comes to like this, process of following through on something they need to do for an application or for
Yeah.
college or something like that, creativity is like gone out the window.
Yeah, no.
And yeah, so my work in that is sort of opening them up to a different way of looking at things that maybe they've been taught in schools and work, using their own creativity to find a tool or process or a skill or a strategy that works for them. And that is really like most of them are receptive because I'm like, you're already creative. You can do this. That
Yeah, but
there's no problem. Yeah.
well, I think sometimes people are like, "Well, I can write a song, but I can't fill out that form.
Right.
Can't
Hmm.
do that algebra or calculus test." But it's like music is math, right?
Hmm.
And you're already dealing with a lot of complex timing and, you know, a lot of what's
Yeah.
going on, and you're not giving yourself the grace to understand that you already know a lot, but you just
Hmm.
don't want it, you're not processing that you know it. So you have to look at things through different lenses and give yourself some grace. Like it might take you longer to get to this than somebody else. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean you can't
Yeah.
do it. It just might
Right. Yeah.
happen as quick as it happens with somebody else.
Yeah. I think really understanding the way your brain works, like your particular unique brain, can really help that process. Make you one maybe give yourself that grace that it's going to take you a little longer because you're really fast over here and other people aren't fast over here. Like we're all different speeds,
Yeah,
different
different
places.
capabilities.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
all getting measured about like, well, this guy can do that calculus thing and like
yeah,
that, and I
yep,
take like a half hour and I still don't get it right. And so it's
yep,
like, okay, well, how do I get better at that?
yes.
Well, it's like anything. It's like it's training.
Hmm.
Like in order to get out of like a loop that doesn't
Yeah,
get you anywhere, you have to retrain your mindset. Just like
yes,
a musician sits there and practices the chords so they know the scales and they know how the chord arrangements go. That comes from like, thousands of hours of practice. Well, how to actually behave socially if you're not really good at it, well, you got to practice. Right?
Mhm.
If you're not good at certain things, it takes effort, and it's not always like overnight. That could go from 0 to 100 without
Yeah.
doing the work. It's like, to me, as everything's relatable. It's like, why I got to put as much work as I put on my base to this effort if I want to get this done.
Yeah, I think, it's this deprogram and reprogramming that we sort of have to do. Sometimes, like a lot of people that I work with, well, creatives, we are always going to be chaotic and we can never get our life together. Like, we've internalized messages because maybe we have come through a different lens. And we're very good at riding the waves of being in a process with something, but setting a goal and taking steps, that whole thing just scares them, or
Yeah,
us in some
yeah.
way.
And
But
and
it's
the
like,
struggle.
what are you choosing to believe about yourself? What's the program you've been telling yourself? Um, you can absolutely, you've made a million things. So you've absolutely had a goal and you followed through. And what made you do that there? And how do we now apply that over here? What's your way? What's your method? What works for you? I was doing this application one time a number of years ago now for this program, and I was just staring at it. It seemed the questions were really big. I was super overwhelmed, and I had a coach at the time, and I went to my session, and I'm like, I just don't know how do people fill out these sorts of applications? I'm so overwhelmed. And he's like, you're asking the wrong question. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're asking how people do it. How do you do it? And I was like, well, I would draw pictures. He's like, well, go draw pictures. So I drew pictures and then the words just came. Right. But
Mhm.
like,
Yeah, find your
that's
process.
your
Yeah.
process is so important. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so because you get it some new task and that you haven't done it before, that you feel kind of unsure of it and uneasy. Because anytime you step your toe in the deep water a tiny bit, it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're scared, you're gonna lose safety, you're gonna drown in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Mm-hmm.
like you have to kind of figure out, like, how do you approach, you know, digesting this thing. You can look at this whole big thing that you got to do. You
Mm-hmm.
got to design something and you got to get it out in 6 months and it looks really big and it's got a big budget. And it's like, wow. If you look at the whole thing, you could be like, oh, how could I ever do that? But
Yep.
if you start to like take the bite-sized pieces and start organizing what you can do, like what could you do in the next hour?
Yep.
What could you do 4 hours from now? What could you do a day from now? What could you do a week from now? You start to think it's like, I don't have to do the whole thing today,
Mm-hmm.
but you do start having to, like, you can't procrastinate. So you can't
Yeah.
say, well, I'll look at it tomorrow. Like, you got to have some kind of plan of attack, right? And figure out
Yeah.
how are you going to do it, not how somebody else does it, but how are you going to manage it?
And sometimes that could be really challenging for some people to break it down. One of my favorite things I have people do is just take out a stack of note cards and just everything you can think of related to it, any task, anything that has to be done, anything that comes up on a separate note card, on a separate note card, on a separate note card. And then they're like, it's tactile. Again, we're out of our heads. We got
Hmm.
something we can play with. And you can kind of flip through and say, oh, what can I handle right now? What can I do right now? Or you could play with it and put it in an order if you want to. Or you
Yeah.
were just talking about AI. I sometimes have my clients go into AI program and be like, here's what I'm trying to do. Please help me break this down into a bite-sized action plan. And
It
just
can help your
getting the
stuff
little
like that.
steps, even a 5-minute goal. Like we do 5-minute goals all the time. I'm like, do 5 minutes. Because what happens is you start doing something for 5 minutes. You actually really set a timer. Just 5 minutes is all it takes. And then once you finish it, you could check it off your list. And anytime you have achieved anything you said you were going to do, you get dopamine. And dopamine is the motivation hormone. And now you're motivated. So likely you're
Mhm.
going to keep going, right?
Yeah.
You might not, but you still achieved a goal, even if you didn't. 5-minute goals is what sort of, after a very dry period for me in art making, reopened everything.
Everything from a
Was
dry
a
spell.
5-minute doodles each
Yeah.
day. I was just like, I don't know I can't seem to start or finish artwork. And I would just do doodles, doodles, doodles. And then that just expanded, right? And like broke open into a whole new thing.
Yeah. I had an author on that was saying, like, do these, like, challenge to do something in like 5 minutes. short story,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you can get done in like 5 minutes. But, say you're gonna do these little micro stories,
Yeah.
and like instead of trying to think about the whole plot or the whole world building, it was like they were in the middle of doing like a novel, but then they
I
hit
love
like
that.
something, then they started doing these little short things that had nothing to do with it, but made them feel like, oh, at least I finished that.
Yeah.
So then it gave them the confidence to kind of come back in and then have a different lens. It's kind of like walking away from a piece and then coming back
Mm-hmm.
and then seeing like, oh, I didn't see that. You go
Yes.
for a walk in the woods in New Hampshire, like I go walk in the pines. I could have been saying on something in the studio for like 2 hours and say, "Oh, forget it. Leave
Mm-hmm.
it where it is. Go for a walk,
Yeah.
and then
It's
come
so
back."
important.
And then you're like, "Oh, and now I hear something I didn't hear.
Yeah.
Now I see something I didn't see." Sometimes, like just like you have diminishing returns if you had to stay on it for like 8 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do
Yes,
that.
it needs to breathe. It's like I think of it as a living, breathing entity, right? Like you can't smother something. And that's kind of like sometimes we're like, no, I need to make it work. And it goes, gets all smothered. I had this professor in undergrad who I was working, he was a visiting professor. I was working in the ceramic studio and I was so frustrated on a piece. And he came over and he's like, how can I help you? I'm like, I'm so frustrated. And he was like, start another piece. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
what? He's
just
like,
start something else.
never, ever, ever just have one piece going. Always have at least two.
Yeah, have a
And I was
bunch of
like,
going.
oh, like we're so programmed to do one thing at a time. You don't start something else. So you get something else done. Like I feel like,
Multi-thread.
yeah, very linear thinking out there, like pervades, a lot of the messages we get as kids and growing up in school and stuff. And, creativity likes to fly in the face of all of that. And I
Kind
think
of
we'll be,
throw it at the wall. Like a
it
lot of
does.
times, as an artist, is like I like to throw it at a wall. Like I'll be in the middle of something, stop,
Hmm.
go totally different direction, just put all these things into my archive,
Hmm.
and it's like sometimes I go look at tape A versus tape B. Something was from 2 weeks ago, something was 6 months ago, and there was Frank Zappa was famous. There was a picture of him in his living room, and scattered in his living room, he had all these recorders and all these tape machines, and they all had different things.
That's
And
so
he would
cool.
go and grab stuff from live concerts, stuff from the studio, stuff from here, stuff from there, and they would start like listening to him and say, "Oh, I can take this and mix it with that and mix it with that." And it's kind of a very non-linear process, just grabbing stuff from all over the place and seeing what works.
Hmm.
But a lot of times, there's a lot of artists that's what they do because like it
Yeah.
keeps you from hitting that period. So I don't know what I can do. It's like, well, look at what you've done and then see
Hmm.
what we can go forward with all the stuff that you have in this. Like you've got all this stuff you've done. It's like there's
Yeah.
probably something in here that works.
And that's, I think, such an important point too, because a lot of people get stuck thinking, well, I have to come up with something completely novel. Like every part of this has to be brand new. And then they get stuck. And like creativity loves that. It loves like, let's look at this thing I've done before in a new way, or let's put it with this over here and see what happens. And then there you are, like you said, like off
Yeah,
running instead of like starting
like
like a
a
blank.
collage effect.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
when people would take like clips from newspapers and do collages or throw things together. It's a
I
kind
love
of
collage.
random
Yeah.
non. It's like when you think about filmmakers that have timelines that are all over the place.
Hmm.
And it's not totally sequential. It's kind of going back and forward and this one there and pulling this out and there's a little Easter egg here. And you're like, oh, that actually meant something. I
Yeah.
didn't know it. So it's like
Yeah.
writers will do that too. They'll throw things in there, then go back to it and they kind of reinvent something. It's like
Hmm.
they take something from the past and then make it have more meaning. And it maybe wasn't originally that way.
Hmm.
It suddenly becomes that way because like, oh, in the moment, it's like, here, I can actually redefine that.
Yep.
There's nobody saying I can. It's my world. I can do what I want.
I could do what I want, right? Yeah. It's so fun when we let go of the rules, that it's always a nice practice to check in if you're stuck, right? To say, what rules am I making up right now about what I'm doing? And what rules are helping me and what rules are hurting me? And a lot of times, and give yourself permission to let go of the ones that are just not working. And there you go. You put the
That's like a
past in the
productivity.
future in the past.
Well, productivity strategies. Like if you've got productivity strategies that are failing,
Mm-hmm.
trying to stay on them is like, well, does that make sense to stay on something that keeps on not working? Right. So,
Right.
so
And
eventually you have to like let it go.
you do. And yeah, I mean, productivity is a huge topic, and a lot of people that I work with have this idea that it looks like one thing. I always give the roadmaps metaphor. So I lived in Chicago for a long time. And, if you were to look at a map of Chicago, what do you see? It is a grid. It is almost a perfect grid, right? Because it burned to the ground and then they planned it. And so
And they replan
I
the
was
whole thing.
never lost in Chicago. It's flat. I always knew where I was. The day I moved there, knew where I was. And then I moved from Chicago, which is, very planned and put together. And then I moved to London for a little bit, which is like a spaghetti bowl, like
It's all over the
this.
place.
Yeah, like this. And I tell people, I'm like, everybody thinks that their brains and the way their life should look, it should be like Chicago. That's what we have, this idea that that's how life should look like and our brains should look like. But we're all much more like London.
More
And,
spaghetti.
as much as it was hard and I got lost a lot in London, and I had a bike. So I had to stop, and this is before GPS. So, I had to stop and flip through the book that
You
was
have to
called The
figure out where you
A to
are.
find where I was. But I also found these cool little trails by the canals. I found this one place that had gigantic tortoises one day, roaming around, and I could pet them, and all
Yeah.
these little magical nooks and crannies that I would have never found had I known where I was going.
Yeah.
You know,
Sometimes you want to be like Jack Kerouac down the road, you don't know
yeah,
where. And people want, safety of having a plan. And people say,
exactly.
well, you're more
Yeah.
responsible if you have a plan. Not that you don't have an outline, right? You might
Mhm.
have an
I
outline.
still have my A to Z. That was my
Yeah.
tool,
You still
right?
have, where you want
Yeah.
to go, but it's kind of like the road less traveled. Like you want to go and found like whether, music, we got like a newfound sound
Mm.
is actually more exciting than the old standby sound. Right?
Mhm.
If that's why I'm a synthesis. And so a synthesis, what we do is we design our sounds before we even
Mm.
write the song. Actually
Oh, I
take
didn't know
sound waves.
that.
Yeah, it takes sound waves from oscillators and make tones. And I
Mhm.
spend a lot of time making my own tones. So I
Yeah.
don't just take preset tones or tones from I actually create tones that are customized to my song.
Kinda
So
like
they
mixing up your paint,
yeah,
right?
it's like making
Mixing
a
up your paint.
custom paint. It's
Yeah.
the same idea. It's like a paint,
Mhm.
we call it sound painting. And,
Mhm.
it's the same kind of thing. You color the tones. We even have color commands, color dials on our oscillators that mix, sine waves with square waves and pulse waves, and we can make waves kind of blend together and turn them inside out and do all kinds of interesting things with the sound. And it
Mhm.
creates like a real thing. Like each wave it goes toward a bell or it goes toward the wood block or it goes toward a bass. It goes towards certain things that
Mm.
as known sounds, and then you
Mhm.
go into territories of sounds that you never really heard. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
that's what I want. I want the thing that I haven't really heard before.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. It's putting together something new to excite us, keep us going, keep us in the mix. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the other thing that we need a lot of. And that's why sometimes our strategies stop failing, is because we like new, right? We want the new thing. And so we got to keep creating fresh
well, the
stuff to keep
algorithms
us in
always
the
like the
game.
new thing. That's the problem. It's like we live in a world where people like things that are repetitive and guaranteed to
Mhm.
hit a certain target.
Mhm.
When you do something that's new, there's a lot of times when it comes out, people don't know what to think of it.
Yeah.
They get it and it's like, well, I don't know how to categorize it. I don't know where to put that in the market. I don't know
Yes.
how to. The A&R guy says, what genre is this?
Mhm.
When you like come up and say it's expansive sounds, like what's that? What's that mean?
Yeah. Oh,
They're like, I was like, is it trance? Is it hip hop? Is it big beat?
yeah.
Is it psychedelics? Like it's expansive. It's like I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
What are
I
what are
yeah.
you supposed to do with that?
I don't know. I find that, I do a lot of networking as an entrepreneur too, and people are like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, I mean, like there's so many things. And so that's why I'm like, I usually just start now. I'm a multi-passionate creative. Okay. I do a
Yeah,
lot of things.
you came up with the thing, like expansive sound. That's my thing. Like your
Yeah.
thing is
Like,
yeah,
let's just not try to niche ourselves or put ourselves in a box all the time and what we do. And let's, let it evolve, and grow
a
with
law of
us,
attraction.
and
Let people come to you. Like your tribe will find you.
they
Like
will.
you find like, hey, there's a group of people that are into IDM experimental music that like
Hmm.
my stuff. But then there are people that are into progressive rock that like my stuff.
Hmm.
Well, that doesn't mean I'm a progressive rocker. It just happens to be some people see some elements that appeal to them.
Yep.
That might be in this area. Other people see things they appeal them from this other. So it's like it kind of comes together. That's the whole idea of like progressive rock was it was jazz, it was rock, it was classical. It's all mixed together. And
Hmm.
that was kind of this kind of catch-all. New wave was like that too. It's kind of a
Hmm.
catch-all. It's part punk, it's part rock, it's part funk. There's a lot of different things. It's not all synth. Tons of
Hmm.
new wave songs have a lot of guitar, have a lot of like world beats in it. It's like it's kind
Hmm.
of hard to define,
Yeah.
because you're like Duran, you got Talking Heads.
Right.
Well, they're not exactly the same. They're totally
Mm-mm.
different, but they're in the
Hmm.
same genre. It's like that's a very wide genre.
Hmm. It is. It is. And that's totally, yeah. I mean, I'll get people who come to me just because I call myself a multi-passionate creative, because they're like, is there some,
What's
it's okay. It's okay that I don't do one thing, like, because I never know what to do. And I'm always working on 10 things at once. And I'm like, welcome to the club.
And then, yeah, it's the law of
Like,
attraction. You pull the people that are on the same frequency as you.
yep. Yeah.
Like if you put stuff
Precisely.
out in the world and you put that term out, then people are like, that appeals to me. Because
Yeah.
these people are telling me like, oh, I've got, I'm a fantasy writer, but then sometimes I like to have romance in my fantasy. Does that make me a
Hmm.
romance fantasy writer? What does that
Hmm.
make me? Like, well, I
Yep.
like to have that element, but I'm not writing pure romance novels. I've got something else going on. So, people tend to not be just in one lane, though people
Yeah.
want to be in one lane because that makes it easier, you know?
Yeah, we think it does. I know earlier when I was an entrepreneur earlier in my years, I was really trying to get that whole niche thing, because I thought it was going to be so much easier to talk about what I do, and it could land for people. But I kind of started seeing that conversation more like we were talking about art. Like if I just own that I do a lot of things and I see who I'm with, then I could talk. I know what to talk about with you. Like
Yeah.
it's not that hard to figure out. Oh, this person is a teacher. Well, let me talk about my education background. Oh, this person loves to paint. Let's talk about that. Oh, this person is ADHD. Let's talk about
Yeah, yeah.
neurodiversity. Like it makes you able to talk to so many people about
Makes it
so
more
many
authentic.
things. Yeah.
If you
We're
go to
all our own jam, you
Well, if you
know?
go to a convention, right, and you got this set elevator pitch and you see this guy's like a sales
Mhm.
guy's trying to do the set elevator pitch to everybody
Yeah.
versus this other person comes in, they're very authentic and they kind of listen to what people are saying. They tailor what they're saying. They're very authentic, kind of in the moment. They actually listen
Mhm.
to the person and they find, like you said, somebody's talking about, oh, they have ADHD. So you go that angle. Oh, this person
Mhm.
says, well, I like this type of thing. And then you come with that angle. It's not like you're trying just to people please, but you're able to hear and
Yeah.
synthesize in real time a very authentic conversation.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like an infomercial
Right.
versus somebody
Yes.
coming in and they're just selling, there's like this pitch, like, are you trying to sell encyclopedias or
Mhm.
a vacuum cleaner? Or are you actually trying to show me that you're having a conversation?
It's true, and it also makes me show up like asking questions about other people instead of just trying to tell people what I do. It's just
Yeah.
like I feel like those things can be very much like that. Everybody's just trying to tell each other what they do instead of getting to know, who are
Yeah.
you? What's going
Ask
on
a
over there?
question,
Like,
not just
yeah,
said you
what
do
brings
the
you here? What's going on with you? Yeah.
yeah, the first second you meet them, they're on the elevator pitch it boom, 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 boom.
Mhm.
Rather, it's like instead of asking, it's like, oh, you know, what's going on with you? Like, what are your interests? And then you actually have some feedback before you start your conversation. You know a little bit about the other person and see like, well, maybe this is what we can talk about.
Yeah. I
You
had
know,
a situation the other last week. I went to a networking thing, and it was mostly with people in like in the corporate world. And I was talking to this guy who says, well, I sell health insurance plans. And my first thought was, what the heck am I going to talk about with this guy? And, and then I was like, well, what's your favorite part about it? And he's like, well, health insurance is so interesting. Did you know? And he started telling me all these things. And he's like, I just love strategizing around people's wellness and like gets, into the whole strategy. And I'm like, oh, we're talking about building habits. I talk about building habits all day long with people. Like, oh, this is the whole art of habit building. And before you knew it, we were in this fabulous conversation. And like, that's the magic of what can happen. It's,
So
it's art too. It's art too.
Everybody kind of has their thing to get passionate about. And you
Mhm.
can have a preconceived notion that this guy's just a sales guy.
You're right.
He's trying to sell me something. Or you could actually listen and say, well, he's actually passionate about what he's doing. And he's pitching it in a different way. And it's actually not feeling like a pitch. It feels like he's passionate about it.
Yeah.
It feels like he actually feels like there's something he's adding value. Right. So when people, you feel like they're bringing to you something and like, wow, I might not be into that, but this person's so into it that I find it interesting because of the level of of it just they just seem to be authentic.
Yeah, I feel like a nice what you just said, I was like, oh, that would be really good to talk about, which is like passion versus pitch. Like be passionate, don't pitch me, just be passionate. And
you end up like, if you're a podcaster and you're pitching like you want to get people on the show because you want to get commission, you want to get this, you want to get that, but like what I feel like somebody's trying to sell something. If they're saying I got a mission to have people have their voices heard because I don't think their voices are being heard, and I want people who are emerging artists or emerging entrepreneurs and they're not getting their message out, I want to give them a stage to do that. That's a different conversation than
that's a beautiful conversation. Yeah.
Than the other one.
That gets me like, yes. People are like, yeah.
You got some guy that's just like, oh, I'm not trying to figure out my Salesforce.com numbers. It's like, okay. It's like, I'm not really into that. That's what people want to know. It's like some people get real, into the metrics. It's like,
yeah. Thank goodness for those people, but they're not me. They could be complimentary. I was speaking to I went to a event. I was volunteering. Somebody that I know teaches marketing at a local university, and they're trying to help the students learn how to market themselves, and networking. And I was just having a lovely time talking to these students and they wanted us to give them feedback. So we're having sort of these conversations, and this guy was so into the metrics. And I'm like, you know what? There are creative people who will just love you and hire you because they don't want to look at them. They just want to create,
They don't want to do the SEO. They don't want to figure out how to get me, to be at the top Google search number, or trying to, get the keywords right, and it's such a weird, the algorithms are shifting so much because now they got all this AI. So somebody could tell you a strategy and they could sell you a strategy, right? But by tomorrow, the algorithm could shift and that strategy is not even going to work. Yeah. Because that's how fast these algorithms are shifting because of the AI now.
That's just crazy.
So people who go get people to pay to do their stuff is like suddenly it's not looking at the tags. It's actually using AI to look at other things. It's looking at looking deeper into the body of your description. And that's not the tag. It's how your description stuff is written. Or how like in the podcast description itself, not the tags, but the actual description of the episode. It's looking at that and then figuring out how to place it. Well, that every episode is different. So how you come up with a strategy that's going to work for every episode, unless you're talking about the same type of thing all the time.
Right.
It's going to be very customized. You have to like really work on it. So it's really overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
That's why that's their job. It's like well, it's not my job. I'm the artist. It's like you figure it out.
I create the things, you play with it. Like you play with it on that end. Just let me create. And
your marketing team has to be up on the fact that things are moving so fast. They can't just have some kind of set formula. The formula's got to shift. And that's one thing I know, it being a techie, that is like, they come to me and they said they got this set formula. I'm like, that's not really going to work.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really makes it like how important it is as a creative person to just really like what you're putting out there. You know, when I'm working with artists and creatives and authors, even, I'm like, make a marketing strategy that's actually fun for you. Like, make content you can't wait to share. Like, make it fun, because you just don't know, you know, unless you really hire somebody and spend a lot of money. These things are changing so rapidly. So do something you enjoy. Make it as creative as your creations, you know?
You gotta be passionate about it, because I think what happens is, like, you're passionate about what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the law of attraction kind of idea is, like, then people feel that vibe,
Mm-hmm.
and they feel like you're like, hey, this person's always showing up. This person's always excited. This person's like talking about this and the way they're talking about it. And it doesn't feel like, you know, the next prescription drug song. You know, it's making me want to turn the TV off.
Yeah. I know. I rarely watch it, but when I do, it's always there, right? And you're like,
like which it's like they used to write songs for commercials that I actually enjoyed listening to. But these guys writing these songs now, they're just really turning me off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what makes you think that song sounds as good as like the ketchup commercial, like Anticipation, back in the 70s? Right? You listen to the old jingles in the 70s, listen to anything from the 70s or 60s, and listen to the new jingles today. You're like, what makes you think that works?
Yeah. I don't know. The only thought I have is that it's so annoying that it sticks. Like, you know, like, it has to be good enough or like so bad that it sticks. I don't know.
If it had a higher quality, it's like, where's the quality? Maybe this is a child of the 70s. I think it's better, but somehow it seems like it is better.
I think it probably is. I think it probably is. Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole art to that as well. But there's a lot of, it's interesting too, because I think what a lot of the technology makes us do too is want to create things faster. So and sometimes that's fun, right? And sometimes I don't want to just poo-poo that on a whole, because sometimes that can be really cool, but it can really diminish quality.
Well, yeah, sometimes you had these guys from like Tim Panelli, you know, you had songwriters like Carole King and Neil Diamond. You had really good songwriters that were writing these pitches. So if you look at the old pitches, they're actually done by really good songwriters.
Oh, I didn't know that, but that makes so much sense.
So then when you get some of these new pitches, like, who the heck is doing this? It's like it's like I can kind of get it now. I understand. Like, there's a craft. If you don't think there's a craft to music, right, and you think AI can just do everything, like, if you don't think there's a craft to acting, you can replace actors with AI. And there's like a disrespect for art, because you just think that my token technology, you should pay me. You should pay OpenAI. You should pay Gemini. You should pay Google. They want to shift the money to the tech bros instead of the artist.
Right.
I understand. So they'll say they'll go, you know, AI is going to replace all the artists. Well, because they have an interest in that, because they'll make the money. The artists
right.
They get like listen to who's telling you that, and then look at the quality of the work they're putting out, and then look at what real artists do, and you can make a judgment.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, feel like one of the things I think about a lot too is how artists will create a neighborhood and change a whole neighborhood from the inside out, and then they can't afford to live there. You know, it's like it's that whole thing. Like, here we are, we're showing up, we're being super creative, we're making all these things. I mean, how many artists have been involved in creating AI, you know, and then, you know,
you don't get paid.
Then by
well, it's all about contracts. You know, artists have always been kind of messed up on the contracts. You know, like if you look at the music industry, the contracts were just very oppressive.
Yeah.
Where like the artist made the least amount of money of everybody in the chain.
Right.
And they make, you know.
And that's one of the things I'm just so passionate about, is like changing that narrative in our society, but inside of us, that says that what we do isn't valuable. like it's just so important, because that's what happens. If you don't really value what you're doing, then you will sign a crappy contract, right? Like you will do your work for free in exchange for maybe some exposure, or like,
Yeah.
we do all these things because we've internalized this message. And the more we understand how powerful our creativity is and our artistry is, we don't fall for those things, and we do demand different.
And
I've
we have
been
a
on a
right.
huge
Yeah.
journey for that.
Yeah. Artists have a right to, like, music, because in the age of Napster and everything, people feel music is like, oh, it's free.
Right.
It's not free. It's like there's a lot of effort that goes into the art.
Mm-hmm.
And, you shouldn't just get paid just because you're a top tier.
Right.
Like if you put the work into, like, the amount of work it takes to do a record, it's the amount of work that an artist does, any artist does. It's a lot of work. And,
Mm-hmm.
and to not get paid for it because you feel like, oh, it's just free. It's just a mindset where people's like, no, you got to understand, like, just like, an accountant gets paid for doing that report,
Yeah.
an artist should get paid for doing that song.
Yeah. Absolutely. We should. Mm-hmm.
Doing that piece of work art, you shouldn't just go and I can just grab that off the net and copy it and then paste it somewhere. And like, why can't I use it? Because I can grab and click it and copy it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because your tool can grab and copy it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that that's actually right. Your technology got beyond the actual transaction where you should have paid the artist.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have paid the artist.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And, and there's a lot of people using even these AI tools in a way that makes it obvious that they're not artists.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to look and say, oh, yeah,
Well,
hired a
prompt
graphic
engineering.
designer for that. Ooh.
Yeah, I saw somebody like saying they were like an AI graphic artist, and it's like all you do is like really intricate prompts,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the same level of art that my daughter does, or a person like you, like anybody that's an artist that's been trained. That's totally disrespecting the training and the craft.
Mm-hmm.
It's like thinking an AI, actor is going to be able to do what Orson Welles does in Citizen Kane or The Third Man. Is like,
Yeah.
it could replicate what was said in the past, but it's not going to have the feeling and the emotion and non-verbal, eye contact and the stuff that an actor does with their eyes
Yeah.
alone. Like,
Well,
with
that's
all the things they do. It's like,
yeah.
how was it going to do that? It's just going to mimic what was done in the past.
And that goes back to what you were saying with like law of attraction, right? Like if somebody creates something, there's an energy in what's created. Like when I do a painting, my energy is in that painting. The energy I'm feeling, the energy I'm putting out, it's in that painting. And, if a human isn't making it, you're going to lose some of that. And people are going to, yeah, it might look nice, but why aren't I feeling things?
Yeah, you don't
Why,
feel it.
why
That was
doesn't it feel soulful? Why is there not what's this missing? And like, I can't put my finger on it. And I think, it's a tricky business with art because we want to both be valued, like we should get paid for these things. And also the value of it is not about money. It is like soul. Like it is like pure expression, human soul. Like
it's hard to put a price tag on the soul because it's actually like, it's worth more than money.
Yeah.
And so then if we can get, fair compensation for work we do and not be, a lot of times people say, well, when are you going to get a real job? Right. Because they just don't value art as something, but all of our culture is based on art. And then people say it's not valuable. It's kind of oxymorons. Like what's going on?
Yes.
It's like, like all cultures, Western culture, Eastern culture, all the cultures of the world are built on art. But then you say being an artist is not valuable. Go be an accountant.
Yeah. I mean, I had so many people say, oh, that's so cool. You're studying art. What are you going to do for a living? And it's like, they didn't even know it. It's just so automatic. They didn't mean anything bad by it. Nobody meant anything. It's just assumed that that's, and I internalized that for a long time. I mostly didn't make my living from art for a long time. So, it's just one of these things that it takes time. One of the processes I'll have creatives do when they are trying to make, money as an artist is write down all the messages they've received about that,
Mhm.
just so they see why this is challenging for them, but then also go look. There are artists making it and killing it. And it's like we forget that that's happening
Yeah.
because we're so ingrained with these messages. But there are artists who are doing
Well, you
well,
have to believe, I think it comes to
Yeah.
yourself, you have to believe that your work is worth
Hmm.
that. And like if you have some kind of internalized thing where you don't think that you should put a price on your painting,
Hmm.
you shouldn't put it in the gallery so it could be purchased, right? That you don't put it out in the market so somebody can see it.
Right.
And then you'll never get that indie film scene. You'll
Nope.
never get that photograph ever recognized because like somehow you don't feel you're legitimate. And it goes back to
Hmm.
the kind of self-worth
Hmm.
argument that like once you feel like yeah, I believe I am worth it. I
Hmm.
believe that this does have value. And
Yes.
it's not being arrogant to do that. It's just to kind of knowing who you are.
And I think it's a vigilance. I think it's constantly being vigilant because that voice will keep sneaking up on you and you have to keep saying, not today, not today, like not right now. Nope, I'm worth it. Yep, I'm going to put that out there. Um, I had a mentor once tell me nothing ever goes away. Your voices don't really go away. It's just a matter of like trying to turn down the volume on the ones that aren't helping you and turn up the volume on the ones that
That's
are.
true.
And I find that really a helpful thing, because it helps me anticipate that they're going to show up, especially if I am going to take a risk. That like that voice that says I might not be good enough for this, or it might not be worth it for somebody to pay that amount, that's going to rise up and I can anticipate it. And I'd be like, okay, what else do I think about this? Oh, there is a voice that says I am worth it. Oh, there is a voice that says, no, you're totally worth that. Let me buy into that one a little bit more today.
Well, I think that's a really good place to end on because we actually hit our hour mark. It always happens faster
Ah,
than I ever
it
imagined. But
does.
we have doodlediary.substack.com as your URL. That will be fully clickable. So people click on that. What will they find there?
So this is where I send people because I have 3 different websites, but I love my Substack because I write about all the things that I do in my Substack. And it's free. You don't pay for anything. There's a paid tier, but mostly it's free. And then you'll find weekly-ish creative blogs from me, some cool stuff on taking those creative ideas and making them a reality. You'll see some of my artwork. And yeah, events and workshops online and in person that I've got going on.
That's awesome. I want to let everybody know that will be fully clickable in the podcast description. We were just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and we will be on all the platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And that URL will be clickable in that podcast description on those platforms. But I want to thank you for being a guest on the Fam Lecter Goes podcast. It's been always enjoyable to talk to people who are artists. That's my first love with talking to creators, and it was fun. So
It was
thank you
so much
again
fun.
for on the
Oh, I
show.
appreciate it.
Have a great night.